Well, this does explain a lot. CD Projekt's quality has been slipping for years now, and building a strong ESG portfolio, coincidentally, also takes years, as contrary to popular belief, it is quite difficult to sell one's soul to the devil. And the ESG system is hands down the closest thing we have to ye olde Satan here in the modern day financial world. Now, I reckon most of you already know about ESG, seeing as it's been actively ruining geekdom for years now, but just in case you don't know what it is and why a gaming company bending the knee to it is such a big deal, let me give you a quick rundown. ESG stands for Environmental, Social and Corporate Governance. Already the warning bells are ringing, and is in effect a point-scoring system where a company is assigned a ESG score depending upon how well it kowtows to a series of primarily political and ethical demands. Actually, screw primarily, it's a score based purely on political and ethical demands. Because at no point does the value or the quality of the actual product being produced affect the ESG score. In turn, that score is used to determine a company's access to a truly astonishing quantity of investor money, with some estimates of the total funds available surpassing $1 trillion. And all you've got to do to gain access to a slice of that pie is to bend on over and take their agenda up the pooper. And what agenda? Well, it is naturally enough a current year laundry list of far-left talking points, of which the CD Projekt video is a fantastic example, as it could have been written entirely by a bot. It is a constant stream of buzzword soup that means nothing and frequently contradicts itself. I particularly love the part where he goes, "Here we do things the CD Projekt Red way, not following a strict schematic. We also make sure we always follow codes and regulations too, of course." I really genuinely hate this modern day idea of the corporate communist. You know the type. The wearing a mass-produced $9.99 Palestina scarf hipster that complains about capitalism over his Starbucks coffee bought with daddy's credit card as he flips through Das Kapital on his iPhone. As the modern-day poet Eminem once said, there is no such thing as a halfway crook. But there is such a thing as a useful idiot. The video goes on at length, talking about how important diversity and inclusion is to CD Projekt Red now, which is why, obviously, they have created a women's-only, no men allowed, special program called Girls in the Game, because the definition of diversity is exclusion. And hell, I ain't even joking when I say that. As creating a program that can only be accessed by those with the correct genitalia is precisely what ESG is all about. In fact, before I go on, allow me a quick little side note here. This is an extremely fitting excerpt from the Cyberpunk 2020 supplement book Neo Tribes from the mid-90s. Quote, "Diversity and unity. It is now accepted amongst historical scholars that in the decades before the collapse, America suffered from the sickness of racism and cultural identity. Everyone wanted to be seen as special. Every group had to be equal to or preferably better than its neighbors and fought to protect its special rights. If anyone had something that someone else wanted, they were painted as racist, sexist, elitist, or worse. This divisive, me-first attitude eventually tore the fabric of American culture apart and caused it to self-destruct in a fireball of competing ideologies, none of which truly recognized each other's validity. Diversity led inexorably to anarchy." End quote. Turns out Mike Pondsmith was a goddamn prophet, as we continue to barrel headlong towards our own cyberpunk future, as finally we have CD Projekt's new goals, which unsurprisingly do not include make good games that aren't buggy and or unplayable messes on launch, but instead focuses more on the ESG score. And this really is the crux of the matter, of the problem right here. Complying with the ESG code is basically a company whoring themselves out, dressing up just the way the client likes it, which in this case I imagine will include pigtails and braces, as the ESG clientele is the private jet to a secretive island with a temple-style people. But hey, silver lining, we will certainly be seeing more of Rebecca soon, or a creepy-ass live-action version of her anyways. But if it was just about fluffing the elites for money, then so be it. It's not my asshole getting drilled, or, well, is it? The biggest problem you see with the ESG score system is that it introduces a conflict of interest between us, the customers and the gamers, and the investors. In the old system, investors simply placed their money into whatever was likely to make them more money. This minimized the conflict between our two parties because, as a gamer, my only interest in CD Projekt Red is that they make good games. And so long as they make good games, I will give them money. And so in turn, the investors will get a profit. Simple dimples. It really genuinely was a beautiful system. Now, it did have its own issues, like all systems do, namely that head honchos and money men didn't understand gaming, and so they would toss entire genres like horror and strategy onto the garbage heap of history because they, quote, didn't sell, whilst mindlessly chasing the same overpopulated trend with every other 2-bit company. But that simply amounted to a difference in views of what was a good game, as the aim was still to create products that people wanted to buy. With the ESG investors, however, our interests are completely unaligned. In fact, they are the antithesis of one another. I want a good game, they want a political fluff piece to feel good about. It is the problem of 90s environmentalist movies all over again, where theoretically there is no reason why a movie with an environmental message has to suck, and yet they all did. Why? Well, to put it simply, it is because they always, universally, placed the message above the medium. You cannot make a good movie if you don't try to make a good movie. This is even more true for video games. In a movie, all you need to do is sign the contract of suspension of disbelief for a couple of hours, and so the creator only has to walk the tightrope between message and medium for a couple of hours. In video games, we are talking tens of hours, and that's tens of hours of much more personal of an experience, where you are far more directly connected because you are not simply watching the story, you are the story. You are part of it, you are an integral piece within that story. And thus you will be hypersensitive to everything that is not that story. This is what we used to call immersion, that oh so desirable ability for a truly great game to just suck you in. To make you live the experience, to the point that in your real life you find yourself hearing the game's music or checking around for the stealth bar on your UI. But again, this state is also extremely fragile and will be instantly ruined by anything recognized as an outside influence to the experience. For an example, if I am wandering around in my medieval Europe simulator and suddenly I enter a hyper-diverse village in central Poland filled with blacks, brown, Asians, and Native Americans, I know why those characters are there. I know that decision was made in a boardroom, not in a writing room. And so I know that I am no longer in the game world. I am no longer in the experience. I am in some European Union executive's wet dream, rather than my own video game experience. And this is not a hypothetical, this is not a ridiculous out there scenario, this is what happens every single solitary time a video game company or a geekdom company of any sort starts getting onto the woke drug of the ESG score. They start pumping out more and more corporative product because what they're actually trying to do is not make a good game, they are trying to make a game that ticks as many of the ESG boxes as possible to make sure that the company overall gains as much money as possible via investors rather than sales. And this is also evident in that suddenly now, CD Projekt Red, a company that has taken years and years to create a single product, is now suddenly churning out titles like mad. They're working on a new Witcher project, a saga, which is going to be a trilogy of 3 games over 6 years. They're working on 2 other Witcher games as well, in addition to a cyberpunk sequel and an unannounced IP. They are shotgunning this, again in all due likelihood to tick as many boxes as possible. And the worst part of all of this is that this is the exact opposite of what they need to do. Recently, I made a video talking about Cyberpunk Edgerunners, the anime from Trigger, and I loved it. I think it is a great anime, and you know what? There is not a speck of politics in it, not an iota. It focuses simply on telling a good story with good characters in a good universe. It focuses expressly on very solid, built-up, fleshed-out and interesting characters, and on making Night City a deeply inhospitable and awful goddamn place. The exact opposite of any ESG score. And what did that result in? It resulted in a 315% increase in Cyberpunk 2077 players on Steam. It resulted in the primary marketing for Cyberpunk now revolving more around the anime than the game. It is very clear what the audience actually want out of CD Projekt Red. But with the introduction of ESG scores, I very much so doubt they're going to be getting it. Because now, CD Projekt Red isn't making a game to sell to us, they're making a game so that they can get more investment money. Though I will also say, before we get all doom and gloom here, the ESG people are also the ones that got us into our current energy crisis predicament. They are very much so the green lobbies that left Europe reliant on Russian gas. They are very much part of the global elites that have screwed over so many countries so royally that they are in for a serious bit of backlash, politically speaking, in probably the very near future. And what's more is as well that a lot of the ESG investors have been spending their money because they don't goddamn care about it anymore. ESG is literally an investment form made for people who have making money as the secondary interest to making a political point. A thing only possible in a world where you've got too many people with too much money and not enough problems in their lives. And with the economic situation as it's looking now, well, for better or worse, I think even the ESG investors are going to have to start earning money again in the near future instead of simply just flushing it down the toilet. Who knows, maybe if we're lucky, we'll even make a return to a bit of good old-fashioned bloodsucker capitalism, where people will simply invest money into making good products instead of preaching at the consumer base. And in the case of CD Projekt Red, as a company, they should have a clearer sign of what they actually need to be doing to make good products than almost any other company. We can only hope that the lesson will actually sink in. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.